afternoon and welcome to another webinar as part of Health and Safety Month 2021. My name's Kate Maheras and I am the Head of Regulated Industries in Health and Safety here at WorkSafe Victoria, and really proud to be hosting today's webinar. As per last year, whilst our program of events is virtual, we still have the same aims, which is to keep you up to date with all that you need to know around health, safety and wellbeing in your workplace. And if you didn't know it already, the theme of this year is you learn something new every day. So our session today is going to cover the new regulations in dangerous goods storage and handling and how they may impact your business. So we've structured this session as a conversation between panelists, which I'll shortly introduce, that will explain the new regulations in the context of their work around mitigating dangerous goods and hazardous substances storage and handling in workplaces. So let's go to introducing our three panelists that are my peers here at WorkSafe Victoria. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Conrad Tulloch, who is the Group Leader of the Dangerous Goods Strategic Inspections team here at WorkSafe. Good afternoon, Conrad.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kate, and good afternoon to everyone else. Thank you, Kate.
Great to have you here. And we're also joined by Linda Naylan, who is in Conrad's team. She is a Senior Inspector here at WorkSafe. Good afternoon, Linda.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me today.
Great to have you here. And finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rodi Sforopoulos, who is a Senior Dangerous Goods Advisor here at WorkSafe, working closely with Conrad and Linda. G'day, Rodi.
Hi, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so before I get into the conversation, I'm going to give a little bit of context and background for the audience today. So in 2018 and 2019, two major industrial fires blackened the skies over Melbourne. They emitted toxic smoke and caused very significant health risks to workers, neighbours, communities and the environment. The 2018 West Footscray warehouse fire was a major industrial fire that took days to fully control. Investigations by WorkSafe announced after the fire showed that the warehouse was not registered to store dangerous chemicals. In 2019, the Campbellfield factory fire at Bradbury Industrial Services covered a site of 5,000 square metres and was finally extinguished 4 days later. The waste management facility provided storage and disposal services for hazardous and industrial waste and specialised in treating solvent and other waste from paint and related industries. At the time of the fire, some 300,000 litres of chemicals were on site. So Conrad, I'm going to start with you in this conversation. Can you talk to us and give our viewers a bit more detail around the background? What part did these fires play in the update to the regulations, which happened in the middle of this year, and how were they developed?
Yeah, thanks very much, Kate. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. Yes, I've been working in the chemical industry my entire career, both with industry and with regulators. So I'm passionate about playing a role in preventing large-scale dangerous goods incidents in Victoria. As mentioned before, in 2018, there was a large chemical fire in West Footscray, and in 2019 in Campbellfield. And as a result of these, the dangerous goods regulations were amended. And this was at the request of the Minister for Workplace Safety. So these incidents did get a lot of attention in the media and in Victoria. I attended the Campbellfield fire on the day, and when I turned up there, the entire site was engulfed in flames. There was an explosion. There were chemical drums soaring high above the warehouse. And I recall it was a Friday, it was a hot summer's day, and all the fire trucks were in place. There were about 175 firefighters in attendance. I guess when a WorkSafe turns up to an incident like this, our role is to make the site safe. I did speak with the workers who had evacuated the site, and there were about 20 workers who had. They all did manage to get out safely, but yet two were hospitalised. They did have burns to their hands and arms, and some others did suffer smoke inhalation. And I guess speaking with the workers, I did get an understanding of just how quickly that fire did spread. The fire started in the decanting room, so there was an IBC that was being decanted. And from speaking with the workers, within 1 minute, the entire decanting room was up in flames. And then within 3 minutes, the entire factory was engulfed in flames. So it all happened very quickly, and it was quite overwhelming. And I recall seeing a car across the road, and all the plastic on the car had melted, so you could just sort of see the intensity of the fire. So probably just seeing how it can go wrong so quickly probably demonstrates how important it is to safely store and handle flammable liquids. And this fire could have been prevented if the controls were in place. If they did have controls of ignition sources and controls around the flammable atmospheres in the decanting room, the fire wouldn't have started. So it was a preventable fire. I guess the outcome of the investigations found that there was a need for more current and more critical information to be provided on the dangerous goods notifications. As was said before, one side hadn't provided the information and the other had provided insufficient information. So I guess around the notifications, there was consultation with the community, industry groups and agencies, including EPA, Fire Rescue Victoria and local council. So I guess all that consultation was to make sure that what we were asking for could be gathered, and it was in line with the expectations of the community. And I guess the outcome of these amendments are that the occupier must now notify more regularly and provide more information on the types of chemicals that they do store. So this came into effect on the 1st of July this year, so it's relatively recent. And I guess just summing up, the changes have been made to prevent large chemical fires in Victoria occurring again by having better notification and also a better understanding of the risks and controls in place to prevent these types of incidents. As well as that, the notification information is used by the emergency services in developing their capability to respond to incidents. So there's a bit of information. So thank you, Kate.
No, thank you, Conrad. And really, thank you for sharing your experience and really honing in on the impact of those fires that I gave the background to. So, Linda, I'm going to come to you next because I understand you are our expert on all things notifications and the regulations that Conrad mentioned that were amended on 1 July this year. Can you tell us what a notification is and why it's so important to get it right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kate. A dangerous goods notification is a legal requirement. So that's stipulated in the dangerous goods storage and handling regulations. And you can look that up on our website. Within those regulations, to let us know of dangerous goods, so you need to let us know if you have greater than manifest quantities of dangerous goods. Again, that is in the regulations, and that's found under Schedule 2 of those regulations. Now, the reason that we have the new regulations in place, so the amended regulations, is, as Conrad said, is because of these large fires, we've identified a great deal of risk, and we need to know more frequently, and we need to be aware of changes that occur on site, because this helps us to ensure that at WorkSafe we have enough resources and that we can assist workplaces with managing their risk.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. And can I just expand, though, staying with you, how did the regulations actually change to reflect the new requirements? Because some people might be familiar with what the old regulations said.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the new regulations, as of 1st of July, as Conrad was stating earlier, is that workplaces need to re-notify with WorkSafe. So one of the main differences there is that in the past, there was a 5-year time frame. So with the new changes, workplaces need to let us know every 2 years. And this regulation also states that from the 1st of July this year until the last day of this year, that workplaces must notify. So even if the notification you have on your wall currently says that you have 4 more years, it's actually only going to last until the end of the year, and then you must re-notify under the new regulations. Some of the things that we need to know additionally, so there are some changes. There's additional requirements if there are changes in your workplace. So say you get a new piece of equipment, so a new process that manages chemicals, so that process is for, say, decanting, then you need to let us know about that. You also need to let us know if your quantities increase by 20%. This will again help us to manage risk. And you must display the notification. So in the past, We like to see it, but now it's written into the legislation that you must display it.
Okay. So if I'm an employer though, Linda, how do I actually notify? What's the process now?
That's a really good question, thanks. So nowadays we don't have the paper form anymore. The paper form, we found it was quite limiting and it was very restrictive of the amount of information we can gather. We have an online notification portal. There's many ways to access that form. Current notifiers would have received some communication from WorkSafe. And if you're new to notifying WorkSafe, you can just jump on our website and look up dangerous goods notification. That form will take about 10 minutes to fill out, and the best way to do it is to have your dangerous goods manifest at hand, and then you can just cross-reference with that.
Yeah, okay. So Linda, and you definitely are an expert in this space, and this is why I'm staying with you on this. People who are familiar with the dangerous goods regulations would understand what written advice provisions mean, and they exist in the regulations. Have they changed through this process? I think it's important to clarify.
Absolutely. So there hasn't been a change to the written advice request. So for those who don't know, the written advice is when you're at notification levels on manifest quantities, you must seek written advice from the fire authority. These days for all over Victoria, it is Fire Rescue Victoria. With that written advice, it needs to be sought before you just to have a look at your emergency management plan and make sure that everything's in place, make sure your fire systems are all up to scratch.
Yeah, excellent.
And so, something, just adding in, we found that people have been getting a little bit confused. So the changes for 2 years only relate to the notification. They don't actually relate to the written advice. So that's still every 5 years. So there's no shortened time frame on that. Thank you.
Oh, that's good to clarify, Linda. So no change to the time frame on the written advice, still 5 years, but 2 years for that notification, just to refresh everyone's memory. So thank you, Linda. Rhodey, I'm going to come to you now, and you are a senior dangerous goods advisor, as I introduced you earlier. But for us lay people who are not experts in this space, what is a dangerous good or a hazardous substances? Because there are two definitions here. And can you give us some examples?
Yeah, I can, Kate. So hazardous substances and dangerous goods are classified differently. But I want to caveat this, first of all, by saying that most hazardous substances are dangerous goods and most dangerous goods are hazardous substances. So we'll just start off by saying that. So hazardous substances are classified based on health effects. So they can be immediate or acute or long-term and chronic. And they're usually classified based on GHS, which is the globally harmonised system of classification and labelling. So you'll see little pictograms or little diamonds, white diamonds with the red, that have got little health warnings. So you'll see like a exploding chest, or you might see what looks like a cricket bat or something like that on it. And that's the GHS. So it's usually around how it will affect your health. Whereas dangerous goods are classified based on their immediate safety hazard. So it's usually on their physical properties, and it's their ability to cause a fire or explosion or corrosion. So it's something that can happen now, and it's physical. They're classified based on 9 classes, and the 9 classes are really their physical properties. So you've got gases, explosives, flammable liquids, flammable solids. I won't name them all, but their diamonds are also very much based on their class number and what their physical properties can actually do. The other key difference in Victoria, and I say that just in case anyone is from interstate or federal, is that hazardous substances fall under the OHS Act and regs, and dangerous goods fall under the DG Act and regs. However, before anyone panics and thinks they have to go out and look up both sets of legislations and comply, they are complementary. And our code of practice, the code of practice for the storage and handling of dangerous goods, which can be found on our website, does have a lot of information and is very helpful to help you comply with your obligations under both sets of legislation.
Oh.
And sorry, I'll just give you some examples because you did ask.
That would be helpful.
A hazardous substance that is not a dangerous good, and I can only really think of one off the top of my head, is Roundup. But dangerous goods, which are also hazardous substances, are many. So you've got things like petrol, acetone, paints, whole range of paints. You've got chlorine, bleach. A lot of household products are dangerous goods and hazardous substances as well.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that, Rhodey. So I think that those practical examples are really important. But one thing I want to connect to what Linda talked about around the new notification or the amendments to the notification requirements. When does this obligation arise? So what do we need to know about that? And can you give us some examples?
Yep, sure. So the obligation arises to notify when you actually reach manifest quantities, which, as Linda explained previously, was when you reach manifest quantities, which are outlined in Schedule 2. And we actually have this table on our website. Now, with this table, which we refer to as Schedule 2, it has quantities for placarding, manifest and fire protection quantities. So we'll just talk about manifest quantities for now. The important thing to note here is that it refers to dangerous goods classes and packing groups. So this information can be found on your safety data sheet, and it's usually in section 14, which is the transport section. And when we talk about packing group, that refers to the level of danger of your dangerous goods. So packing group 1 is high danger, packing group 3 is low danger, and obviously packing group 2 is medium danger. So the higher the danger, the lower the quantity you can have before you need to notify, and obviously the higher the packing group, the more you can have. So some examples, diethyl ether is a class 3, it's a packing group 1. And I'm just going to refer to my table to make sure I give you the right information. So excuse me for a moment. So the manifest quantity is 500 litres. So it's not a lot to have before you actually need to notify. And that is because something like that is extremely volatile and it is very dangerous. Petrol is a class 3 packing group 2. So if you've got 2,500 litres, so it is a lot more than a packing group 1, that's when you need to notify. And then moving up to a packing group 3, so regardless of class, my example is chloroform, which is a class 6.1, so that's a toxic, but it is a packing group 3. So you can have 10,000 litres of that before you need to notify. So you can see the difference between packing group 1 and 3. It's quite substantial. And the only other thing I want to touch on, so the schedule is quite detailed and it goes through combustible liquids. It'll go through what happens when you've got mixed classes and so forth. So you can have a look at that at any time. It is on our website. Is with gases. So gases are a little bit different in that we don't have packing groups for gases. And the way that you report the quantities is a bit different. So when we give manifest quantities, so for example, 2.1, which is a flammable gas, so LPG, for example, the manifest quantity is 5,000 litres. So when you report that, it's not actually the amount of gas in the cylinder, it's based on the water capacity of the cylinder. So that's for all gases. So if you were to take that cylinder, fill it up with water, how much water would that cylinder hold? And you report that in litres. So just a quick example, a 9 kilo barbecue cylinder holds 9 kilos of LPG gas, but it actually holds 22 litres of water. So just bear that in mind if you're reporting manifest quantities of gases. Regardless of the gas, it's always water capacity of the cylinder.
Yeah, thank you, Rhodey. That is something I did not know and I have learnt today. So thank you for sharing that. And no doubt that code of practice you mentioned has a lot of the details that you just spoke about. So encourage viewers to go there for more information. So Conrad, coming to you now, as I introduced you earlier, you head up the Dangerous Goods Strategic Inspections team. Can you tell us about what your team does and the type of work that you get up to every day?
Yeah, thanks very much, Kate. It's called the Dangerous Goods Strategic Inspection Team, bit of a mouthful, so we call it DGSI. Our team, it's a team of inspectors, and Linda's the senior inspector on our team, and we've got 230 sites that we look after. They've got the largest quantities of dangerous goods below the major hazard licence threshold. So these are sites having less quantity than the refineries and the gas plants like Longford Gas Plant and Geelong Refinery. These are sites that have large amounts of chemicals but don't have a major hazard licence. And these sites store large quantities of flammable materials and toxic materials where there's a potential for off-site impact. So if a site was to have a major incident, there's a potential that you could have a plume of smoke coming off the building like we saw in Campbellfield or West Footscray, or a toxic release. So we've used the risk assessment framework to go through and identify sites that have this potential risk. And most of these sites are in a similar size to the Campbellfield and West Footscray sites that did have these incidents. I guess the program covers a wide range of industry sectors. So it's not just the dangerous goods facilities. There's also industrial gas facilities, chemical waste recyclers, and there's actually quite a few food manufacturers and cold storage and dairy. So these sites have anhydrous ammonia or toxic materials that, if there's an incident, could be released off-site. As well, we have quite a few water treatment facilities and wastewater treatment facilities where they have large amounts of chlorine and could also have a significant off-site impact. In the team, we've got 6 inspectors, and we sort of case manage the site. So each inspector is assigned to a site, so there's that ongoing working relationship can be formed, so that there's understanding from both parties. And part of this inspection is to go into greater depth and to allow the inspectors to have that time and to review their processes and check that the processes are functional and implemented. Yeah, so I guess if you are one of these sites, I'll probably give you a little bit of a heads up on some of the things that we may look at when we head out. So I guess the first thing is around hazard identification. So these sites should understand what their greatest risk is at that premises. So as in the case of the Campbellfield site, it was a decanting incident. So I guess the site should go through and say, what activities do we do on site? Decanting, reacting, mixing, transfers. How could that go wrong? And what do we need to do to stop that going wrong? We're also looking at induction, information training and supervision. I guess what we've sort of seen in the chemical industry, there's a lot of cost pressures and reduction in manning levels. So we're probably not seeing the same level of expertise provided at these sites. But I guess the thing though is that there are significant risks at these sites. So people do have to have that expertise and understanding of what they're handling and how to handle it safely. The other one too that we're looking quite a bit of detail is around control of ignition sources in hazardous areas. So, I mean, as with the Campbellfield site, if you've got a fuel source, you've got oxygen and ignition source, then you can have a large fire. So it's really around making sure that the ignition sources aren't there, or making sure that there's not a flammable atmosphere where this can occur. Another key thing that we look at is emergency planning. When it does go wrong, how do we stop it escalating, or how do we reduce the impacts? So we do look at the fire protection systems and also the emergency plans, making sure that the fire protection systems are suitable for the materials that they do have in the incidents that can occur. We also look at the DG storage and handling areas, both the bulk storage and the package storing. And I guess one that keeps coming up is around chemical waste storage and disposal. And often that's not given the same level of focus as the chemicals that are used in the manufacturing part of the business. So we do look at those to make sure that they are stored safely in the time that they're on site, and that they're disposed of safely, and that they're not accumulated on the site. The other things that we look at is the maintenance systems to make sure that the vessels and equipment are maintained correctly. And the other item this year is around permit to work. So often a lot of incidents occur when there's maintenance work being undertaken. So a permit to work system will ensure that the maintenance task is done in a safe manner, and that the controls are put in place to prevent an incident when somebody's doing maintenance on a tank or a pump or a piece of equipment. So I guess with our program, we've worked really hard to engage with the other agencies like Fire Rescue Victoria, EPA. I know there's always sort of been a level of frustration or that we may work independently, but there's been a lot of effort that's been put in for more of a coordinated approach. So we do meet regularly with the fire services. We do joint visits with the fire services and EPA. So the idea being is that sites won't get as many separate visits from the different agencies, more of a coordinated approach, so you can sort of deal with this in one go rather than having 3 or 4 different people contact and engage with the business. And with this, it's not one visit. We're looking for a long-term working relationship to improve the controls and safety on the site. We've also the program started up in the middle of COVID, so we've been doing a lot of virtual work with industry forums and developing guidance material, as well as looking at sort of emerging issues. So during COVID, there was quite a lot of new businesses got into manufacturing of hand sanitizers, so we did quite a bit of work around making sure that was done safely. And another issue that we're doing quite a bit of work on is the storage of lithium batteries. So you may have sort of seen in the media there's been some fires relating to that. So we're looking at that sort of prevention space, looking at emerging issues, and looking to prevent large-scale chemical incidents in Victoria. Yeah, so probably just in summary, it's a deep dive inspection, looking at the controls to prevent fires and releases of toxic materials on site. Thanks very much, Kate.
Thanks, Conrad, for that very thorough response. And interesting piece about the hand sanitizer. That is something that I'm sure our audience didn't realise, the hazards around the manufacture of that. So, Rhodey, I mean, speaking of that and the manufacture of things, you work to support provide technical assistance for inspectors in Conrad's team, but also right across WorkSafe. So in similar vein, can you sort of talk to us and share with the audience a bit about what your role involves and how your team supports the focus on dangerous goods?
Sure can, Kate. Our team's a small team, so we've got 9 staff. Out of that, there's 4 senior dangerous goods advisors. We provide specialist technical advice and support to DG inspectors across WorkSafe. So that could be mentoring new inspectors in the field. It could be supporting our experienced DG inspectors who have come across an unusual issue or an issue they don't quite know how to handle, or it could be just a really complex issue that needs some research, some technical advice, someone to go and research to look into standards and other issues. So we provide all that additional support that our inspectors may need. We're also across a number of other issues, so I'll cover as much as I can remember briefly. So we do statutory approvals, so DG packaging approvals, road tanker approvals, explosive authorisations, all within the state of Victoria. We do state and national exemptions, licence assessments for high consequence dangerous goods, pyrotechnicians and explosive licences. We provide councils with planning advice for DG sites, DG advice to the public via our dangerous goods inbox. We provide specialist technical advice to other agencies such as EPA and Fire Rescue Victoria regarding storage and handling or transport of dangerous goods as well. We also work with VicPol and Marine Safety Victoria regarding the collection of time-expired explosives around the state of Victoria. And one of our team members actually oversees 2 explosive magazines. And within our team, and with some of the inspectors outside of our team, we have some explosive authorised officers as well who are trained to go and actually collect these explosives, package them up, and we do that on behalf of the state, basically. Another thing we actually do is we represent WorkSafe on Australian standard committees and some national regulatory committees as well. So for a small team, we are very busy, but we do love supporting our inspectors.
Yeah, no doubt. It does sound like a very busy agenda there. So
it is.
Given where we're at 12:30, I think it's now time to get to some of the questions that I can see coming through on the screen to my right. So if you haven't already thought about a question, time to put it in, or you might like a question that someone else has put in, which is absolutely okay as well. So we're going to try to get through as many as we can, noting, as I mentioned earlier, we won't be able to spend all day talking about this, but there's lots of information you can get afterwards. So this is a really really specific question. So, Linda, I'm going to start with you on this. And then if any other panelists want to jump in, just sort of pop your hand up and we'll go around and around. So the question, well, the comment is, and it's a question as well, we've struggled to gain clarity on whether digital safety data sheets or SDS are accepted on the road or if it must be printed. Linda, got any advice in that space?
On the road as in to do with transport?
Yeah, let's take it as that.
Okay. Hopefully that is where the question's going. So if it's in relation to transport, to do with the Australian Dangerous Goods Code at the moment, you still need to have that physical copy with your emergency book in I think it's in your driver's door. Is that right, Rhodey?
That's correct, Linda. Yep.
Yep. Like it's been a while since I've done road tankers, but yeah, that information should be there.
Yeah, perfect. Rhodey, do you want to add anything more to that question that you think might be helpful for the viewers?
No, I think Linda's covered that okay, but it does have to be a physical copy. I'm not sure if they're heading towards digital. I think the issue with the whole digital is what happens if the battery goes flat. That's the whole issue, I think, with the digital world. I know we're heading towards paperless, but that information is really important. So,
yep. No, we've heard it here printed, and I think that answers the question nicely. So I think already you were the one talking about symbols, those little diamonds. So I'm hoping you might be able to answer this question. We have both GHS, you mentioned that, and DG symbols, which are different. What symbols should we be displaying at work to be compliant? And the sort of example here is on decanted chemicals.
Okay, decanted chemicals, usually GHS symbols because the chemicals are in use. Mm-hmm. They are generally in use, and I'm pretty sure it's covered in the OHS regs.
Yep. Linda's going to jump in.
No, Rhodey's answered that side of it great, but just in relation to generally, if you have dangerous goods, the dangerous goods regulations require placarding, and that placarding has to be the dangerous goods diamonds. So
if they're being stored, it depends because
that's why I thought let's add that too.
Yeah, so if they're being used and you've got them, for example, in a little decanted container, you've got to have an identifier, and it's usually GHS. But yes, if you're storing them, then DG. So in actual fact, if you can print out a label with a GHS and a DG diamond, you're probably safer.
Excellent. Compliant. Use both labels. Sounds like a good plan. But I guess the person who asked that question, the Dangerous Goods inbox, might be a good way to ask that question specifically and get some help from people.
That's correct.
Like Rhodey. All right. Now this question, Linda, I'll stay with you, and Conrad, you might be able to chip in. How does a university display their manifest when it occupies 100 plus buildings? So this must be a real example, a manifest for each building. And where? Is it at the EWIS panel? Do you know what that is? Because I don't know what that is.
I do.
Oh, good.
So that's a really good question. Now, we have lots of large sites, and where it's displayed, it's always at the front, also at the main entrance, and it's in an emergency information box. So you would have seen at a petrol station, that's a good example because everyone goes there, a red box that says emergency information. And sometimes when it comes to a site that has, say, multiple entries and risks of dangerous goods, that manifest will be in multiple locations. This is generally determined, so you definitely have one at the main entrance, and additionally with discussions with the fire brigade and WorkSafe. So if you want some specific advice, do email us so we can be very specific to your example. But the fire brigade will also tell you where they would like it to be, but definitely not in each building. They need to be at the entrances. So it's where the fire brigade might turn up. That's where they need that info to be.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. Good job on that. We've got more questions here, so let's keep moving. All right, Conrad, I'll start with you because you've gotten away scot-free in this Q&A session so far. The question is, do we include chemical waste quantity in the dangerous goods manifest? And so note what they're trying to say is the chemical wastes are temporarily stored and collected by an approved waste provider. So do I need to put them in my manifest?
Yeah, so I guess a chemical waste, it is flammable like any other material, and so it does need to be put into the manifest there. So, I mean, part of this is the reason we put it in the manifest is if there's a fire on site, the fire services know it's there, and when they do their response, they don't sort of rush out to the back of the plant where the waste chemicals are and put themselves in harm's way, or they do put in controls to prevent an incident with that material. So, yeah, the waste is like any other dangerous goods. It's got the same risks, hazards, so it does need to be on the manifest, and the risks do need to be controlled.
Excellent. And I can see Rhodey and Linda nodding madly, so we'll move on from that question. Linda, I asked you about written advice earlier, and this question is about that. The question is, I thought written advice only applied at fire protection levels. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is 2 lots of written advice that's required. So there is definitely the written advice at fire protection levels, and that is for the fire system. So that's making sure that the site has the appropriate controls in relation to if there was a fire on site. However, under Regulation 55, planning for emergencies, there's also the requirement that once you are over manifest quantities, you do need to seek that written advice, and that advice is specifically in relation to your emergency planning. So the fire brigade will come out to your site and they will walk through the site with you. They'll look at your emergency planning and they will make sure that you've covered off everything they would like to see.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, great. Rhodey, can I come to you on this question? Is WorkSafe developing improved instructions to assist with gathering information for the online notifications we're all learning about today to cover the Fire Rescue Victoria requirements? Because these weren't previously stated, or the question is they weren't previously stated in the DG paper notification. So we're going to an online system now. Is there any instructions on how to gather that information that's going to be available?
We'll go over to Linda. She's
handball that one to Linda. That's
yeah.
a good one. See, I didn't know who could answer that.
This is my baby.
Yeah.
So with regards to the written advice, they are correct. So it wasn't asked on the paper form. We actually didn't ask much on the paper form because it was just A4, and there's only so much handwriting we can squeeze in. So we're asking additional things like packing groups as well. And that question is just to help us. So because it is a regulatory requirement, it's helping us to gather facts and to see, are people compliant? And there's a potential for risk if they're not compliant with that. So at the moment, we're just following up. So it's an educational piece. We're not writing improvement notices. We're just saying, hey, just making you aware that if you need written advice for emergency planning, we are going to be following that up.
Yep.
So, and it won't continue. So it's only going to be for that first 6 to 12 months, that question will be on the notification. And then in the future, it won't be on there anymore. It's just to help us get that baseline.
Ah, excellent. That makes a lot of sense.
And so the last part, FRV, when you apply for the written advice, they have a great piece of paper on the front of the application form that actually says what you need to provide with it. So between our inbox and the FRV inbox, you'll find what you need.
Oh, great to hear. Okay, well, that should help that person who asked the question with that answer. Conrad, can I ask you this? Are there any on-the-spot fines under the DG Act or the DG Storage and Handling Regulations? And if so, could this include not displaying the notification manifest? Are you aware of that?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question, Kate. So currently there's not infringement notices for the dangerous goods regulations. So they are coming into play for OH&S. But I guess, from our point of view, it's around controlling that risk and making sure that we prevent large scale or incidents at all. So inspectors do have the powers to issue improvement notice, but they don't have a on-the-spot fine. If there's a serious incident, it will be comprehensively investigated, but that goes through a procedural process. So currently there's not on-the-spot fines for infringement notices for DGs.
Thank you very much. And if you do want to know more about infringement notices, we had a separate webinar last week on that, and also back in July. So you can search our website and find out some more about the infringement scheme in Victoria. Okay, Linda, this question is titled, Linda, what are the features of a good emergency plan?
Oh, wow, no pressure. It really depends. So what the fire brigade, so I've been doing a lot of visits with the fire brigade and seeing what it is they're looking for. Specifically at the start of a good emergency plan, they want to know some details about your site. So kind of like an executive summary of your business. So you'd be like, hi, this is what we do. We are this kind of business. These are the risks that we see as regards to dangerous goods. We have this amount of people on site regularly. So really just giving them an overview of your site. So, if you have forklifts and things, they want to know where that is. They want to know, just your overview to start with. And then it really depends on what your risks are. So it goes down to having a look at the dangerous goods you have on site. So what is the worst thing that can happen and can you control it? And then once you've got those control measures, it's putting it into your emergency plan. So some vital things that need to be in there. If you have a manual fire system, so just say your sprinkler system is manual, the fire brigade need to know that straight away. They need to have the instructions and know how to start your system if that's a requirement. They need to know where the water's going to go to. So if there is a large water runoff, they're still going to put out the fire first, but ideally they want to know, are there drains that need to be shut? Are there interceptors that are going to catch their runoff water, or do they need it straight away? Because there's consequences. So if you can't get rid of the water runoff, then they will need to start getting people in to suck that out with trucks.
Can I jump in a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I guess the important thing is it's a live document. It's not a document that sits in a folder in a cupboard in the front room of the building. It's a live document. So you do need to have emergency exercise, emergency drills, be familiar with it. Because if there is an incident, the quicker you can enact the plan, the less likely there'll be a major or significant incident. So it's something that you really need to, it's a live document. You need to do drills and you need to understand it, and the workers on site need to understand the plan too.
Yeah, excellent. Good tag teaming there, guys. They are the Dangerous Goods DGSI team, I should say. So we've probably got time for 2 more questions. I'm going to try to squeeze them in because there's so many here. Rhodey, you talked a little bit about the guidance and the code of practice, but this question is, and I'm hoping that there is information on the website, but it says, when will the regulations be updated on the WorkSafe website? Can you talk about where do I find information as an employer, particularly the regulations, which are important to understand?
So the amended regulations that Linda was talking about are already updated on the website. So there's a link in there. The code of practice is also there. So if you go onto our website and you go to the dangerous goods page, it's all there. We are in the process of reviewing our tiles and the placement. So everything will start to change, and our team is actually looking at reviewing the guidance as well and updating. The storage and handling regs will be updated in the next couple of years, so that with that, the code of practice will be updated. We'll be putting out guidance as well. So the plan is to slowly update all our guidance and to make things a lot easier for duty holders to actually find information. And there is also the dangerous goods inbox that you can email to get information if you get really stuck.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's really helpful tips. And obviously, if it's something specific for your workplace, that inbox might be a good place to go to. All right. Going on, I think I'm going back to you, Linda, and maybe Rhodey. Are we required to hold hard copy SDSs in the EIB at site entrance, or can we simply ensure a current list of chemicals is on site in the EIB? What is an EIB?
So that's, again, that red box, so the emergency information box.
Yep.
And within that, the consensus with the fire brigade is that they would still like those hard copy SDSs. Where we have sites with hundreds or even thousands of SDSs, they sometimes have to have multiple folders, multiple boxes. Ideally, the fire brigade would like the safety data sheets of your highest risk things, and sometimes they will accept a chemical register for the other things, but it's something that will be in consultation with the fire brigade when they come out.
Okay. All right, and Rhodey is agreeing with that.
Yeah.
I feel like we've run out of time. Well, we have, unfortunately, which is really sad because there's quite a few more questions here. So I'm going to just wrap it up though quickly. I'd be keen from each of you to, I guess, one sort of parting message for our viewers today on what's a key thing you think is really important around the new notification requirements, but also in regards to general management of this risk. So Conrad, can I start with you on that?
Yeah, probably just a simple message. So I think if you do store chemicals or dangerous goods on site, now be aware of the hazards and risks with those materials and understand how it can go wrong. And when you do understand how it can go wrong, then you're able to understand what controls need to be in place. And with these controls, they need to work. We often sort of see fire systems that aren't maintained as they should be. So I guess the thing is, you need to understand what can go wrong, what have I got in place to stop it going wrong, and what do I need to maintain it, and to also sort of test those systems. So I really encourage people to get out there and having been to the Campbellfield fire and you realise that it can go wrong in a big way when it does. Go to your business, understand what you've got, how it can go wrong, and how you can prevent that occurring, because no one likes to see a chemical incident on the front page of the Age or the Herald Sun. So, yeah.
Thank you, Conrad, for that final message. What about you, Linda? What's one thing you'd like the audience to remember after we wrap up today?
Yeah, thanks. I think the main message for today is in relation to the dangerous goods notification requirements. So they have changed. If you notified prior to the 1st of July this year, you must re-notify by the end of this year. And so that is regardless of whether you notified in March this year or 4.5 years ago. You still must re-notify within this 6 months. And if you want any further information on that, it's all on our website if you search up dangerous goods notification. Thank you. And thanks, everyone.
Good job, Linda. Thank you. And finally, Rhodey, what's your final message for today?
Okay, I've just got two really quick ones.
Oh, I did say it was one.
One's really quick. Have a look at what you've got. And if you've got stuff that you don't need, get rid of it. Minimise your quantities of dangerous goods on site. And the second one is make sure your staff are trained in what to do in an emergency, whether that's an exposure, a spill, a leak, whatever it may be. Make sure they know what the risks are, what your hazards are, how to use your PPE, how to get rid of it. Make sure they know what to do.
Excellent. That was like one part A, one part B. So thank you very much. So thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. This is where I will say goodbye to Linda, Conrad and Rhodey. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And now I'd like to say thank you to you, the audience. So thank you for registering to be part of this webinar today. I hope that you found it interesting and informative, and it's given you some information you can take back to your workplace. I think we've well and truly updated you about the new dangerous goods regulations, particularly the notification changes, and importantly, the vital role that these laws have in keeping our workplaces and communities safe from possible chemical and dangerous goods incidents, which we heard about have happened over the last few years. If there are any concerns you have arising out of today, please don't hesitate to call our advisory service or our emergency line if it's after hours, as we're here to support you during these times. And on screen shortly will be a list of key information and further contacts that you might like to explore further. I'd encourage you to reach out if you have any further questions or need information and guidance for your workplace. So that wraps up today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day.